When their village is sold to a ruthless businessman who plans to destroy it, an amateur driver and an old racing legend team up to defeat him in a competition and save the town. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Rally Road Racers, from 2023. Archie Vainglorious is a famous racing driver who became known for being invincible on the track. Since Nash, his greatest opponent, stopped competing for some mysterious reason, no other driver has been able to beat him. Because of this, Vainglorious became the great idol of G, a Loris who dreams of becoming a racing driver. As this dream is far from coming true, he has fun riding his tricycle down the mountains that surround his valley. In doing so, he brings a little adrenaline to that quiet town populated by Lorises practicing Tai Chi. Unlike all the other residents, G lives for adventure and always ends up causing trouble wherever he goes. One day, when he was still a child, he met a girl from his village and was thrilled to find someone who shared his passion for racing. However, his grandmother soon appears and interrupts the conversation. After that, they never saw each other again. Bai then drags his grandson back home and claims that he is just as stubborn as his late mother. Although everyone thinks he's weird, G wonders why he's not accepted, because he feels bad that he can't be himself. The Loris doesn't understand why he is forced to practice Tai Chi, when what he really likes is racing. Then his grandmother explains that this technique is used by their people to slow down the mind and allow the breath of life to flow through their bodies. According to her, this practice will help G find his way and allow him to discover how to find his harmony with the cosmos. But the Loris doesn't pay any attention to this, because what he really wants is to be on a racetrack. Years later, G has the opportunity to take part in a competition. He immediately rushes to share the news with his grandmother and claims that he will be the big winner that night. However, when he takes the lead in the race, he is terrified to see his opponent approaching at high speed and ends up having an accident. After collecting yet another defeat, G walks home and meets Nash. The old goat tries to cheer him up and tells him that he did well on the track, but nothing can console him. Disappointed with his performance, the Loris returns to his village and goes to sleep. The next morning, he is forced to practice Tai Chi with his grandmother in order to unlock his true gift. As he has great difficulty concentrating, G ends up being distracted by a fly and tries to catch it, but is unsuccessful. Bai quickly catches the insect in the air and returns it to nature. The old Loris then says that she's worried about her grandson because he hasn't found his way to harmony yet, but all G wants is to be accepted for who he really is. Suddenly, the Loris hear a noise and go out to check what's going on. At that moment, they see several tractors from the Vainglorious Industries destroying the town and discover that the entire valley is going to be demolished. Worried about the future of his friends and family, G goes to see Archie Vainglorious and is amazed to see all the trophies the frog has collected throughout his career. When he meets Vainglorious, the young animal asks why the pilot he considered his greatest idol wants to destroy his village. At this point, G discovers that the businessman has bought the entire valley and intends to demolish it to build a luxurious swamp. Furious, the Loris tries to convince the frog to build the hotel somewhere else, but Vainglorious has already made up his mind. While he's being kicked out of the room, G sees a poster pinned up on the wall and has an idea. He challenges the driver to a race and, if he wins, Vainglorious will have to leave the village alone. In the next few weeks, the Silk Road Rally will take place and they will both compete. If he loses the race, not only will the village be destroyed, but G will have to become an employee of Vainglorious Industries. That afternoon, the animal begins to think about the bet he made and comes to the conclusion that he has no chance of winning. Worried about the Loris, Nash approaches him and G explains what happened. When he hears about the race, the old goat decides to train the Loris and tells him that he used to be a great driver. G doesn't show much enthusiasm for the idea, but agrees to start the training the next morning. Despite being a great runner, he always gets desperate when he's about to win and ends up losing the race as a result. So, after turbocharging a vehicle so that G can train, Nash takes the youngster to the track and begins to train his mind not to lose control when he takes the lead. After suffering numerous accidents, G finally manages to win his first race and happily celebrates his victory. Throughout the training period, a spy sent by Vainglorious was monitoring the Loris's progress and passed on all the information to his boss. When he discovers that his opponent is being trained by Nash, the frog is furious because he believed that the goat had perished in his last race. Knowing that Nash is the only opponent capable of defeating him, Vainglorious begins to take steps to take him out of the game. Days later, it's time for the big race and the public is excited to see the great track champion race again. Minutes before the race begins, G meets Burpee, a pregnant seahorse who is wearing a robot suit. Adelina, his wife, will take part in the competition with him and they both share the same suit, which is attached to the racing car. The competitors then take their places and set off as soon as the start is given. In the very first seconds of the race, Vainglorious uses some missiles to eliminate his opponents and wastes no time in eliminating some of his competitors. After the attack, the frog takes first place and G is terrified to realize that all kinds of cheating are allowed in that competition. Noticing that Nash and the young Loris are on his tail, Vainglorious enlists the help of his employees to attack them. Just then, Kale approaches and uses his giant tire-shaped vehicle to run over all his opponents. G takes advantage of this distraction to move forward and take the lead in the race. On the way, he spots a car crash and Nash turns around, causing G to abandon the race. The goat then goes to talk to Neil, his old adversary, and decides to provoke him. In doing so, the tiger punches him and Nash falls off the cliff. However, as he falls, he is thrown back up and he fights back. Meanwhile, G helps the victim of the accident to lift his motorcycle and, after meeting the young Loris, he falls completely in love. After teaching Neil a lesson, Nash pulls his apprentice back onto the track and they continue the race. Just then, Shelby calls Vainglorious and tells him that her job is done. At that moment, the frog crosses the finish line and marks his name on the scoreboard. However, there are still 3 more days of racing ahead and the winner will be the one with the most wins. Soon after, G secures 6th place in the race. Furious, he blames Nash for not getting first place and discovers that it was all just a strategy by his coach. The goat knows that G gets in the way every time he's in the lead, so he's deliberately decided to slow him down so that he'll have fire in his eyes for the next few races. That evening, while watching the recording, he is surprised by Shelby's arrival. The girl congratulates the contestant on his place, but G isn't too happy about 6th place. He tells her that he has to win that race to save his village and Shelby is shocked to discover that Vainglorious is planning to destroy the city of Loris. During the conversation, G realizes that this girl is the same Loris he met in his village a few years ago, but never had the chance to ask her name. Shelby then tells him that after that day she and her family had to move because of her father's job and realizes what a big mistake she made by agreeing to work for Vainglorious. While the couple talk, all the other pilots are having fun at a party. Nash is bowling when the tiger shows up and says he's gone there for a rematch. At this point, the two start a duel and all the other guests start fighting each other. Far away from all this chaos, the Loris couple watch the starry sky as they talk about their village. Suddenly, they are interrupted and realize what is happening. Quickly, G runs into the war zone looking for Nash and ends up being surrounded by Neil's security guards. Then something unexpected happens and everything around him starts to move in slow motion. Thanks to the Tai Chi that his grandmother forced him to practice, the Loris has acquired this skill and manages to shake off the attack. Then G steals a bowling ball and throws it at Neil, preventing the tiger from attacking his friend. The next morning, all the competitors are preparing for the second round of the Silk Road Rally and Vainglorious is confident of his victory. However, both Burpee and the whole crowd are rooting for G. After the video of him attacking the tigers went viral, the Loris became famous and became the favorite driver of the racing crowd. This time, the competitors will have to face an extra challenge, as the track is covered in snow and their vehicles end up sliding. With the help of a hook, G and Nash manage to get off the ice rink, but at that moment they spot other competitors in trouble and decide to stop and help. After sliding off a cliff, the vehicles end up on a frozen lake and the ice begins to crack due to the excessive weight. Worried about Burpee and his family, G thinks of a plan to save them and manages to pull all the cars at once to safety. G's heroic act is recorded by the cameras that follow the race and the animal appears on all the TV channels. Seeing how great her grandson has become, Bai feels proud and ashamed of herself for having tried to prune G all these years. Once again, Vainglorious takes first place in the race and young Loris climbs to third, even after stopping to make a rescue. There are still 2 days left in the competition and the frog is already throwing a party to celebrate his victory. Suddenly, he receives a surprise visit from his father and is scolded for putting his family's business at risk because of a bet. Before leaving, he threatens his son and says that if he loses the competition, he will be disinherited. Terrified that G might win the next few races, Vainglorious calls Shelby and orders her to find any weakness that could be used against the Loris. Later, during the party, the couple meet and Shelby asks him to dance. After a few minutes of conversation, G leans in to kiss her, but the girl decides to run away. She began to have strong feelings for the pilot and felt guilty about working for Vainglorious. The next morning, she goes to talk to her boss. When he hired Shelby, the toad said he was taking revenge on someone who betrayed him, but now she knows that's a big lie. So the girl refuses to continue working for Vainglorious. However, when her father's job is threatened, she is forced to help the businessman win the race. What she didn't imagine was that she would be caught by Nash and the goat decides to tell G the truth as soon as the competition is over. While talking to Shelby about his opponent, Vainglorious realizes that she and G are in love and comes to the conclusion that the girl is the Loris's weak point. When the time comes for the race, the competitors discover that they will have to cross the stone forest and Vainglorious goes to talk to G. The toad intends to tell the truth and reveal that Shelby has been working for him all this time. Knowing that this news will destabilize the Loris, Nash tries to prevent him from discovering the truth and manages to distract G. When the third round begins, the goat is relieved, but spends the entire journey listening to G say how much he's in love with Shelby. Moved by this overwhelming feeling, he turns on all the turbines in his vehicle and manages to cross the finish line in record time. After the race, Nash has to use a fire extinguisher to put out the flames that have appeared in the vehicle's engine and warns the Loris never to race at that speed again. When he asks why his instructor is so angry, G discovers that his mother was also a very skilled racing driver and was trained by him. However, one day, during a competition, she ran more than she should have and ended up in an accident that caused her perishment. After discovering the truth about the tragedy that took his mother's life, G sees his car explode and drives off. Despite coming second, Vainglorious is celebrating because he knows that without his vehicle, Loris won't be able to compete in the final round. Shelby is tied up in her boss's office when she sees him arrive with a smile on his face. At that moment, the girl learns that G is out of the competition and is surprised when the Loris shows up. He goes there to try to make a new deal with the frog, but Vainglorious refuses his proposal. Seeing Shelby next to his enemy, G asks what she's doing there and discovers that the girl has been hired to stop him from winning the race. Disappointed and heartbroken, Loris walks aimlessly and can only think that soon his grandmother and all the residents of his village will lose their home. After what happened during the last race, Nash decides to go home. Just as he's about to get on the bus, he meets Mrs. Bai and she manages to convince him not to give up. The next morning, when the race is about to start, G receives the news that Burpee has to be taken to hospital to give birth to the babies. Immediately, he goes to check that the seahorse is all right and discovers that the babies have just been born. After congratulating his friends, he learns that they won't be able to finish the race. Just then, Shelby appears and tells G the whole truth. She then reveals that she ended up falling in love with him and asks for forgiveness for not having been honest from the start. Upon discovering that his feelings for the girl are mutual, he celebrates with his friends and Shelby says she has a present for him. Determined to help him win that race, the girl reveals that she stole Neil's car and G goes to tell Nash the news. At that moment, the Loris finds out that his grandmother has come to watch the last round and, for the first time, he hears her say how proud she is. The last race is about to start and G hasn't shown up on the track yet. So the other competitors decide to team up to delay Vainglorious and buy time until Loris arrives. In the very first seconds of the race, the group forms a barrier so that the frog can't advance, but Vainglorious passes over the vehicles and takes the lead. Immediately, his opponents go after him and end up being bombed. Suddenly, in the midst of the smoke, G appears and gets closer and closer to his enemy. Just as they are about to cross the finish line, the two cars cause an accident and part of the track is destroyed. Luckily, Vainglorious managed to get through in time, but G was unable to cross due to the hole that had been made in the asphalt. In this situation, Nash says that there is nothing more to be done and all the viewers come to the same conclusion. But at that moment, G remembers his grandmother's teachings and decides to go his own way. Immediately, he speeds up and uses the metal beams as a bridge to return to the track. By a fraction of a second, Loris overtook Vainglorious and managed to win the race with an epic comeback. At that moment, all the other competitors celebrate his victory and congratulate him on a great race. After hugging his grandmother, G takes the trophy and shares that memorable moment with his coach. Now that he has lost the bet, Vainglorious refuses to keep his end of the bargain. However, his father shows up and hands the Loris a document that makes him the new owner of the entire village. After spending several years away from home, Shelby finally returns to the town where she lived during her childhood and starts a new life with G and his family. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.